will maintain a strong armed forces, including a nuclear deterrent. And I welcome that from the Prime Minister and the Government. Now, the Strategic Defence Review, which has been commissioned by the Prime Minister and was overseen by the Defence Secretary, is very welcome indeed, and it is a root and branch review. Now, those of us who've been around here for some time and actually put up with a Conservative government which has let down the armed forces and actually put our defence and security at risk in this country will welcome this review. Because we have to look at the state of what the situation, we've got the smallest army since Napoleonic times. Even the previous Secretary of State, a Conservative Secretary of State, said the armed forces have been hollowed out. We've got a shortage of munitions. There's major problems on procurement and wasted money that needs addressing, and I'm sure will be a priority of this new government. But also the focus as well has always been and will continue to be, and I'm again pleased to see the commitment in the King's speech about our commitment to Ukraine. But we face a real problem in terms of Russia, China, Iran and North Korea and the threat they pose to the world order and particularly democracies. So these are sort of big challenges that we've got to get to grips with. But looking again at our armed forces, about how we can improve, how we can make sure they get better funding, how we can make sure, very importantly, that funding that they do get is spent correctly and efficiently and not wasted. And I think it's very, very important for the future. Now, I'll certainly give way to the Honourable Member.
Can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for what he's saying about the Defence Forces? Very obviously for us in Northern Ireland there's always been a large recruitment of those who serve in the regular forces, but those who also are part of the territorial aspect of it. Does the Honourable Gentleman agree with me that when it comes to recruitment, in particular for Northern Ireland, there should be extra monies made available to ensure that those who want to join can join and the resources are made available for that particular purpose?
I understand the Honourable Member's pitch for extra resources for Northern Ireland, but I think he will also recognise that there is a major recruitment crisis in the armed forces which has been ongoing now for many, many years. It's not just an issue of recruitment, it's actually retaining good, experienced people. And that's really what we've got to really focus on. I'm sure that the Defence Review will look at that as well. But also, it's about looking after our service personnel, making sure they get better housing and better facilities, make sure that the pay is right, but also the veterans as well, and making sure we have the proper services and support for them. So I agree with the Honourable Member in terms of recruitment is a challenge, and we've got to really, really sort that out because it's weakening our armed forces currently. Now, Mr Chopitz, I know time is going on. I just want to say a couple of things in conclusion. We still have a cost of living crisis in this country. Living standards are lower at the end of the last Parliament than at the beginning of the last Parliament. The tax burden is the greatest for 80 years. Our first King's speech will be a down payment, just the start of legislative plans Labour will set out over the next 5 years. Transforming our country will need to be patient and have focused work over a long period of time. As the Prime Minister has made clear, this will be a government of service and will do things differently and properly. Rather than gimmicks and bills that don't work, Labour will be focused on real change for working people.
Priti Patel.
Thank you, Mr Cho. And I'd like just to start by saying how good it is actually to be part of the debate today for this loyal address, and in particular how good it was to see His Majesty attend the House today and wish him well in his recovery, and of course pay tribute to him on what is a record of service to our nation. And I do just want to congratulate all new members who have entered the House and thank the two members that spoke, the proposer and seconders, who are not in their place right now. But I think it's fair to say, this is a note for all new members, and I think existing members as well, that those speeches were made in the finest traditions of this House. And with that, of course, it's one of the few moments that we will have at the start of Parliament to, I guess, unite, to respect each other's speeches and contributions, but also just become accustomed with the traditions, formalities and conventions of the House as well. While at the same time, we get to do the greatest things that we all love, which is representing our constituents. And of course, for the new members in particular, this will become the regular pattern of work in this House, but also a reflection of the hard graft that goes in. And just to touch on that, Mr Chope, of course, we have all just come fresh from a general election campaign where a lot of graft was put in, but we're now here elected to represent our constituents in the normal traditions, but on the issues that sometimes may divide us, but actually where we can advance their causes through legislation. So if I may, I want to begin my contribution around this loyal address to make a few words, say a few words about the tone that I've seen from the new government over the last 12 days. And of course, you know, it's one of those inevitable features, isn't it, with a new government, that you could spend the next few weeks or their first few weeks continuing with that election campaign rhetoric. And we're going to hear this a lot, which is basically talking down the record of the previous government over the last 4 years. But of course, much was advanced over the last 14 years. And we're proud of our record and the transformation that we led, including of public finances. And, you know, these are big things that just don't happen over a few months and weeks. We're proud that we transformed public finances from the government borrowing £1 in every 4 to a much better fiscal position today. It's not easy to get into these fiscal positions, and I think the benches opposite should just reflect in terms of their own fiscal position that they're now inheriting. We're proud to have supported the creation of 800 jobs per day on average, having the faster economic growth of many of our competitors, cutting the tax burden on incomes on fuel duties, overseeing increases in doctors and nurses working in our NHS, more teacher numbers, and schools raising standards. That's a record that we are proud of, including, if I may say so, in getting more police officers on our streets fighting crime and law and order. So it's important, I think, just to be reflective of that. And if I may, in a very subtle and gentle, polite way, say to members now on the front benches opposite, now in government, it's all very well trying to rewrite history, because sometimes it does take away attention from the responsibility of having to govern and to do the big decisions and the choices through slogans. And if I may, Mr. Chope, there are some policy areas that I would just like to touch on. One area is, of course, an area that I want to make some observations where the government has already put forward a programme of government, where I have some experience, which is, of course, having been Home Secretary for over 3 years. We've heard already quite a bit on immigration and crime, but we haven't seen the details. But so far what we have heard from the government, if I may say so, differs little from some of the measures that were already in place, such as a UK Border Security Command, which we actually set up a few years ago, in fact just over 4 years ago, to cooperate with international partners. And some of my colleagues who followed me actually in the Home Office will recognise much of that. The need to take action in the Channel, but to work with our intelligence and security agencies to do so. The appointment of a clandestine Channel Threat Commander, the establishment of joint interagency task forces. These are already or were in place and set up by the previous government. And of course I do want to commend the work of our international law enforcement agencies and our international partners. They work through exceptional, at an exceptional level, but also work to save lives. And I think we should just reflect on that, because it was only last week we saw more lives lost in the Channel again. But also when it came to tackling robust measures on criminal gangs, county lines, putting safer streets policies together and actually protecting our constituents, some of which, if I may say so, Mr. Chope, were opposed by what is now the government when they sat on these very benches. So it's important that we reflect that some things do not happen overnight. There's no single solution to tackling some of these issues, but it is through collaboration and working together that we can actually drive the right kind of outcomes as well. If I may say so as well, on law and order, we heard actually the Prime Minister speak about law and order today, and I welcome many of those comments and reflections on safer streets, on tackling counter-terrorism, but also basically when it comes to addressing some of the most appalling things that we still see and we will continue to see, which is violence on our streets, domestic abuse, victims suffering at the hands of criminals. And of course, none of us want to see prisoners released early from prison, but quite frankly, it's important that we do focus on the victims of crime and have the right punishments in place to ensure that those perpetrators of crime in particular are given tough sentences, which again I noticed were opposed in the previous Parliament, but actually we get that fairness back into our system when it comes to law and order. If I may, Mr. Chope, one of the great achievements of the last government was actually the expansion of renewable energy generation. I think we can be proud of our record of the past, actually, and be proud to be world leaders when it comes with the mix of renewables, passing 40% of all energy generated, and a huge improvement on the situation in 2010. Now, if I may, I do want to touch on, in fact, the Right Honourable Member for Harwich and North Essex has touched on this already, which is how we can actually work on generating new technology when it comes to energy. And with that, I genuinely believe that it's technology, not taxation, that is a path to a much more sustainable future. And with that, of course, I think colleagues actually in the government are now going to realise the reality of some of the projects that exist and will really be dominating their inboxes now, which is the National Grid's attempt through the Norwich to Tilbury plans to impose over 100 miles of new pylons and overhead power lines across the east of England. The National Grid are pressing for these proposals. I and my right honourable friend, the member for Harwich and North Essex, are working basically to find alternatives through technology and looking at how we can actually upgrade the grid by not destroying the countryside across East Anglia. And there are farmers, there are local communities, there are community facilities such as White Notley Football Club who will lose community football pitches to bring in pylons across these constituencies. And that's a huge loss of local amenity, is deeply concerning. My constituents and constituents across Essex and East Anglia want to see alternatives such as an offshore grid or the use of greater tunnelling being considered to actually build up this grid infrastructure capacity. And of course the proposals for the infrastructure and planning bill will be considered with a lot of detail, and I think, if I may say so, the right level of scrutiny does need to come to that legislation, along with the legislation that is being proposed around planning and new housing, and ensuring that local views and the views of our constituents are simply not disregarded. And if I may say so to the front bench of the government, I am aware that they're already proposing a consultation in this area. If I may give them some subtle and gentle advice, listening to the views of that consultation will be incredibly important, because this isn't about saying that people do not want homes. In fact, constituencies like mine have put forward so many plans for new homes. We've actually built over 10,000 new homes over the last decade, and actually they're family homes which have helped my constituency to become a very good commuter town, and a town that is actually successful when it comes to schools and families want to move to our area. But it is a case of getting the balance right, and that's incredibly important. It really is. In the minute that I have left, I do just want to basically make a point about economic growth. Of course, everybody across the country and in this House absolutely fundamentally believes in securing higher levels of economic growth. Every government wants that. Name a government that doesn't want that. We want more jobs, we want more job creation, we want more successful businesses. But actually it is about being on the side of businesses and how we can effectively support them to employ people. In a constituency like mine, over 80% of my constituents are employed by small and medium-sized businesses. We're incredibly proud of that. But the minute more regulation and burden comes upon those businesses, I'm afraid they will lose the ability to grow their businesses and employ local people. And of course, that is the backbone of our economy, small businesses. And if I may say so, Mr. Chope, you know, on a day like today when we see new bills coming forward, through the Loyal Address, through the King's Speech, it is right that as we go forward through this session of Parliament, that we literally give the scrutiny that is appropriate, the time that is appropriate to scrutinise these bills, but fundamentally make sure that we as members of Parliament and on this side of the chamber as His Majesty's loyal opposition provide the scrutiny but also the redress to ensure that constituencies' voice are heard, whether it's on planning, development, economic growth, but fundamentally making sure that Britain advances in the right way forward. Thank you.
I call Keir Entwistle to make her maiden speech.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Right Honourable Member for Witham for her contributions to this debate as well. I'd also like to congratulate my honourable members for Bootle and also for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green for their excellent contributions. And I'd like to join colleagues in congratulating all of the new MPs who have joined me in this House this Parliament. I would also like to thank all of the staff and members who have welcomed me so kindly to this House. As a new MP, I want to reach across the political divide and find the things that unite us all. And indeed, this King's speech offers hope that we can come together to tackle the issues of today for the good of this country. I have the rare honour of having the support in the recent election of all of Bolton North East's previous living MPs, both Labour and Conservative, and that I share one ambition in particular with both of them, and that is for Bolton to be better connected within the region and the rest of the country. And I welcome the announcements in the King's speech on transport today. Sir David Crosby had a long-standing interest in improving the railways in our region, something I hope to continue work on, having experienced cancellations on day one, travelling down this place. Sir David has been a great mentor of mine, and I hope to build on his legacy and do the people of Bolton North East proud. I wish him, his wife Enid, and their family well, and cannot thank them enough for their ongoing support. My predecessor, Mark Logan, who has as thick a Boltonian accent as mine, aspired to work hard to make the required Metrolink from Bolton to Manchester a reality. We have a shared vision in improving connectivity for the town neither of us was born or bred in, but one that we both call home. I hope to work with our ambitious Metro Mayor for Greater Manchester in making this vision a reality, and thank Mark Logan for his service to the people of Bolton, and indeed his support during my general election campaign. I also wish him and his family well. I am the new Member of Parliament for Bolton North East, the first woman to represent this great constituency, the first Alawalia in Parliament, and I had also hoped to be the first Entwistle. However, Major Sir Cyril Fullard Entwistle, and I thought Kirith Cor Alawalia Entwistle was long, beat me to it in 1918, and indeed he later returned to represent the great town of Bolton in 1931. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Sir Cyril and I share some similarities. He was born in Bombay in 1887 to a cotton manufacturer and came to Bolton, where he was educated at Bolton Grammar School in my constituency. How fitting is it then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that all these years later, a second-generation Indian immigrant would move to Bolton, settle down, and then represent our great town in Westminster? Sir Cyril was also an early advocate for equal rights, introducing the Matrimonial Causes Act 1923 as a private member's bill to give women legal equality in divorce cases. We have come a long way since then, as a nation and society, in improving the rights of women and those from ethnic minority backgrounds, such as myself. It is my hope that I can go further during my time here and support great initiatives like the Pregnant No Scrooge campaign, play my part in closing the gender and ethnicity pay gap, improve parental rights, and continue to shape a country that is more accessible, accommodating, and inclusive. Bolton is a town of great innovation, entrepreneurship, and industry, with it being the birthplace of the spinning mule invented by the late, great Samuel Crompton. Mr. Deputy Speaker, having had the privilege of meeting so many fantastic entrepreneurs throughout my campaign, I want to pay particular tribute to the great female entrepreneurs I encountered. Alison Angel, a female mentor who has helped women launch, grow, and develop sustainable businesses, and Mrs. Farida Patel, who owns the shop Mum's Mate in Halliwell, a particularly formidable woman who, alongside her daughters Nazanin and Mezzabine, go above and beyond for their local community. I also had the privilege of meeting Anita, who set up the Bolton Women in Business Awards and voted for the first time in this election and decided to put her faith in me. I also want to mention the inspirational organisation Fort Alice, a Bolton-based charity providing frontline services for people who are or have been affected by domestic abuse and violence. These women helping women, standing up and being exceptional role models in our town, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are the reason I am so proud to stand here today, to tell their stories, to do what I can to support them, and to highlight the incredible work Boltonians have done and are doing. I am also the first Sikh to represent the constituency of Bolton North East. The Sikh values of seva, service for the betterment of others, and humility are visible throughout Bolton. It's in our history, and it has been woven through the very fabric of our town. Community assets like the Bolton Lads and Girls Club, the Octagon Theatre, Bolton Museum and Library are testament of this. And I will do my utmost to keep these at the heart of everything that I do here, and will do my best to protect them and restore rich heritage centres such as the Hallithwood Museum. I have found a great source of pride in Bolton, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it is this pride for our great town that I wish to reflect here in Westminster. I have both the desire and the determination to improve our town, in particular our town centre, which I wish to see revitalised and renewed, and to give our young people hope and a chance of a brighter future again, and finally to see our history and heritage rightly celebrated. For this little Indian girl from the culture-rich Southall, it is a great honour and a privilege to represent this fascinating and heritage-rich town of Bolton. It is time for me to get to work on the role that the wonderful and humble people of Bolton North East have sent me here to do.
Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I begin by congratulating the Honourable Lady on her maiden speech. It's quite clearly a real achievement to be the first to make a maiden speech, and I'm sure members on both sides of the House will join me in congratulating her and wishing her well in the years ahead here in Parliament. Can I welcome all new members to this House, not least because some of you make me look older, which I've been looking for some time. Well, I remember when I was first sworn in the House and I entered in a by-election and so swore in on my own in a class of one, and there was a real heckle on that occasion from the beast of Bolsover. And he said, "Is he here on work experience?" And everyone laughed. But I have a few more grey hairs now, 10 years on, and have just been through a difficult general election in North Nottinghamshire. And I want to begin my remarks by saying a special thank you to my constituents for doing me the great honour and privilege of re-electing me, made all the more so on a difficult night, clearly, for my party. I will use my time in this House over the course of this Parliament to represent them with all of the vim and vigour that I possibly can. Having served as a minister in each of the governments of the last 5 Prime Ministers, I know what a special privilege it is to serve as a minister, and so can I wish our successors in office all best wishes and all good luck in the years ahead. As a patriot, we all know that this government's success is our success, and we want them to tackle the great challenges facing our country and to enjoy their time in office as much as I did in my years in ministerial office. The course of the general election made a number of things clear to me. There were many things that I was deeply proud of that our government achieved, and which I will fiercely defend in the months and the years ahead, taking a bankrupt country and righting our public services and public finances, ensuring a decade of good employment when we inherited high unemployment, particularly amongst young people, ensuring that we led Europe in the defence of Ukraine. I'll give way in a second to the honourable member, but let me finish my point. Ensuring that we reformed our education system, and so that we now outstrip countries all over the world for the literacy and the numeracy of our children. Ensuring that we were one of the greatest countries in the world for tackling environmental challenges, decarbonising faster than any other G8 country. For all those and other reasons, I will always defend the record of the last Conservative government. But I'll come on in a moment to some of the lessons that I learnt of its failings. But I'll give way to the honourable member first.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Is he suggesting that voters on July the 4th were ungrateful?
Well, I didn't quite hear the honourable, but if he was asking whether or not the electorate was wrong, no. No politician should ever doubt the electorate. But it's right that we defend the things that we did well in government, and that there is a proper diagnosis of what we got right and what we got wrong. I think we did get some things wrong. When we stood in 2019, we promised to get Brexit done, and we did that. We got Brexit done, and we restored our sovereignty as a nation, a great and lasting achievement. But we also promised that we would secure our borders, that we would ensure a strong economy and lower taxes, and a strong NHS and public services, which the public rightly expect. And on those counts, we did not deliver the services, the lower taxes, the level of economic growth, and the migration system that we promised and which the public rightly expect. The baton for those things now passes to this Labour government. And where it succeeds, I will welcome and support it. Where it falls short, I will challenge it, because we want to ensure that those great issues facing our country are properly addressed. We live in one of the greatest times to be alive, but it is a time of immense change, when there is a shift in power from west to east, when new technology like AI is upending old industries, where there is an age of mass migration, which is challenging the pace of change in our country, creating huge pressures on housing and public services, on integration, making it harder to build the united country that we all want to see. And I worry that what we saw today in this King's speech does fall short of some of those great challenges. There are undoubtedly bills which I welcome. For example, the bill on the Holocaust Memorial, a project that I have been involved in for many years, and I'm delighted this new government will take forwards. Some are radical, like the changes in our energy policy, and I worry that they are radical for all the wrong reasons. Despite having decarbonised faster than other countries, despite only being responsible for 1% of global emissions, we now find ourselves with a government pursuing, for ideological reasons, a net zero policy which is going to make it harder for our own consumers to afford their bills, which is going to further erode our industrial base, which is going to lead us in hock to Chinese technology, where we're trading dependence on Russian hydrocarbons for Chinese electric vehicles, smart meters and solar panels that will despoil our countryside, where new quangos will spring up, like Great British Energy, which serve no apparent purpose and take inspiration from their predecessors like Robin Hood Energy in my part of the world in Nottingham, a failed project that wasted £50 million of taxpayers' money. And already in the first few days of this government, I worry that 200,000 jobs in the oil and gas sector have been put in danger, just at the time when rightly the government is saying that we want to fuel our economy, to create jobs, and to change the dynamics that we've seen as a country since the financial crash in 2008. 20 or 30 years of low productivity growth and unsatisfactory economic growth. We should all be working to find ways to do that and to make that possible. I worry about the message on the economy that we're hearing. We want economic growth, but economic growth is founded on harnessing the entrepreneurship of our people. It is about creating a start-up country. It is about helping small business people to found businesses around their kitchen tables, like my parents did. It is not a statist vision of this country. It is not about using new quangos or a national wealth fund, which is an oxymoron because it's going to borrow the money it seeks to invest. It's not about changing our employment laws, which make us less competitive and will drive the kind of higher structural levels of unemployment that we see in Europe and which we mercifully have avoided over the last 10 years. And I worry about immigration because we do live in an age of mass migration. And I have been honest, painfully honest, about the failings of the last government on this topic. But I worry that the same or worse mistakes are about to be made again. What we're seeing in the Channel is a national security emergency. We're seeing tens of thousands of people about whom we know next to nothing crossing into our country, breaking into our country in flagrant abuse of our laws. Some of them are subjects of interest being followed by our security services. This has got to stop. And scrapping the only known credible deterrent with nothing else to put in its place is going to surrender to the people smuggling gangs. That's wrong, it's a mistake, and I worry that we are going to rue the day that we did that. I also hope that the government will take seriously legal migration, because we have to accept that the public in this country, in most parts of our country, have been voting for 20 or 30 years for governments and in referendums promising to control and to reduce the level of legal migration, only for governments of all political colours to do precisely the opposite. And that is immensely corrosive to public trust and confidence in politics and in democracy. And as one of our colleagues said earlier about the rise of far-right parties around the world, if we centrist parties on the left and the right do nothing about this, if we do nothing about this, then you will see the rise of far-right parties in this country. And I think that would be a great mistake. So I hope that the reforms that I started to reduce the number of people coming into this country legally are taken forward and that we further reduce them. Because we could have used this King's speech today to implement a legal cap on net migration, embedded by Parliament in law. We haven't done that. And that will mean further pressure on housing, on public services, and on the pace of change. Let me close with this. The Prime Minister has said that he wants this to be a new era in which politics is defined by service. And I think we will all agree on that point. It should be. But the question is, who do we serve? I don't think that we come to this place to serve the interests of new quangos and commissions and reviews. I don't think we're sent here to serve the interests of the legal fraternity and contested notions of international law. I don't think we're sent here to serve the new and worrying rise in sectarian politics, represented in this House for the first time in my lifetime, and which again should worry us. We're sent here to serve the interests of our constituents, and I choose them. I choose to ensure the working people of Newark and Nottinghamshire are always represented. And they sent me here with a few clear messages. Secure our border, reduce immigration, lower our taxes, stop the crimes, build homes, build a more united country, cohesive, integrated, not riddled by the poison of left-wing identity politics. That's what I'm here to fight. Where this government does that and lives up to that test, I will support it. Where it doesn't, I'll fiercely challenge it. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Sir Mark Hendrick.
Mr. Chope, today's King's speech has laid before us an ambitious and exciting vision which will benefit our country and my constituents in Prestons for decades to come. In particular, I welcome the announcement that this government will be introducing a new publicly owned company, Great British Energy. As a first step, Great British Energy will take back control of our energy supply, producing cheaper power for our country and ensure that profits go back into our communities. And as a Cooperative Party MP, I want to see more community energy companies based on the cooperative model. Not only will Great British Energy generate clean energy, but it will also cut energy bills and deliver good jobs. This news comes at a time when our constituents are desperately in need of support. For too long, they have been exposed to the energy insecurity created under the previous government, which has seen a cost of living crisis and bills skyrocketing to eye-watering prices. Every family and business in Britain is still paying the price of 14 years of Conservative failure with sky-high energy bills. The Conservatives have squandered our advantage in clean energy and left the country dangerously exposed to international energy markets manipulated by dictators like Vladimir Putin. And under the plans that Labour have, oil and gas giants who have made record profits from energy insecurity in this country will now be held accountable. A windfall tax on their excess profits will benefit the entire nation, lifting the burden off the public. Working alongside the private sector, we have the opportunity to double onshore wind, triple solar power and quadruple offshore wind by 2030. This investment in renewable energy is an investment in our future. We need to harness the advantage of our long coastline along with our engineering capabilities to become energy independent once again. We need to invest in carbon capture and storage, hydrogen and marine energy to ensure that we have a long-term energy storage our country needs. We need to accelerate investment in energy infrastructure. This can be achieved by this government's Green Prosperity Plan, which involves investing in cutting-edge green technology to create 650,000 jobs in the industries of the future by 2030. The previous government was slipping more and more towards climate denial, but it is critical now more than ever that the UK commits to our future by doing all that we can to achieve net zero, setting a good example to the rest of the world. Mr Chope, I've been extremely fortunate to experience firsthand the progress that has been made in this over the years. As somebody who worked as a professional electrical engineer before entering full-time politics, I've always been very conscious of energy consumption issues and their impacts on the environment. I also served as a member of the European Parliament, where I sat on the Environment and Consumer Protection Committee, where we helped develop the European Emissions Trading Scheme. I'm very strongly in favour of clean energy and our mission to move towards a clean energy transition as a matter of urgency. Under the previous government, I sat on the Energy Security and Net Zero Committee from its inception, where I worked with colleagues to hold the then government to account and focus on the issues so acutely felt by the public, in particular with their soaring high energy costs. And during the Blair years, as a PPS to the former member for Derby South during her 3 years as Environment Secretary in the Cabinet, I became extremely aware of the crucial importance of reducing emissions as quickly as possible. And indeed, when the former member for Derby South became Foreign Secretary, she achieved the huge goal of placing climate change onto the UN Security Council agenda for the first time. Since then, the seriousness and urgency of the global challenge of climate change has only accelerated. It's not just a green issue now, it is a security issue. I'm proud and energised by the fact that this government is committed to tackling climate change and doing so in a way that brings the public with us and encourages international collaboration. By creating jobs and opportunities that stimulate the economy and slash energy bills, we are ensuring that together we can become a clean energy superpower, become energy independent, reach our net zero goals and secure our future for generations to come. Thank you, Mr Chope.
Robinson.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I say what a privilege it is not only to follow the Honourable Member for Preston, but to stand here not only as returned representative elected to continue my representation of my home constituency, but to stand as the leader of unionism in Northern Ireland, to have the opportunity to speak for the people of Northern Ireland in our national parliament with the endorsement not only of my constituents but colleagues right across the province. It is a real privilege, and I am pleased to do it during this humble address and response to His Majesty's gracious speech. The election, of course, Mr Deputy Speaker, you know, brought with it some challenges, and we don't have two of our colleagues that I would have liked to have been here with us today. And I thank Ian and Paul both for their contribution and service to national politics and to politics more broadly in Northern Ireland. But we're not without hope, and I think it is very clear that the additions to the parliamentary team, even though not of our party, will make a significant contribution to life in their constituencies in Northern Ireland and to this place as well. Mr Deputy Speaker, in considering how to respond to this loyal and gracious speech, I think the first thing to say is that we hold His Majesty not responsible for one bit of it, but it is of course the agenda of this government. And if you were to ask someone in rural Ireland for directions, you might find them responding to say, I wouldn't start from here. Now, when I read through the King's speech, I want to welcome the commitment to repeal the provisions of the Legacy Act. And I say that as somebody who over the last 9 years, and alongside colleagues for longer than I, have been consistent in our approach to dealing with issues of legacy in Northern Ireland. And that's not something that everyone in this chamber can say. Over the last number of years, we appreciated the opposition that the Labour benches offered in the face of the Conservative government's pursuit of this Legacy Act. We appreciated the response that we got from colleagues opposite when they recognised that the removal of the pursuit of justice was obnoxious to victims, people who lost the opportunity to pursue answers and outcomes on behalf of their loved ones. But the corruption of justice in Northern Ireland commenced decades ago. The early release of prisoners was a corruption of justice. The on-the-runs legislation, ill-fated though it was a corruption of justice. And the letters of comfort indicating to terrorists that they would not face prosecution was a corruption of justice. And so I'm well aware this evening that the Prime Minister is due to meet with the Taoiseach of Ireland, Simon Harris. And I am well aware that as part of this King's speech, he's indicated very clearly that he is keen to reset relations. And I think that is important. We should have good relations with our near neighbours. But I want to take this opportunity to say very clearly that the corruption of justice, which has now been highlighted by, and we have a commitment from government that they are going to act upon it, should mean that we should have an engagement that's based on honesty with the government of the Irish Republic. And there should be gentle and encouraging challenge to say they have failed in their responsibilities on legacy. When the courts have determined that the Irish government should bring forward inquiries as to what role was played by their state actors, by An Garda Síochána, and by others involved within their territory, there has been silence. In fact, all we've had over recent years from the Irish government was a case against the UK government on this legislation. So let's balance it up. If the engagement this evening is to be fruitful, if there's to be a positive outcome on what is a good commitment and a commitment that we welcome, then I think it is to ask our near neighbours to play their part in ensuring truth
On that point.
and justice.
Can I commend my honourable colleague and friend from East Belfast for what he said? When it comes to responsibility for the Republic of Ireland, what they should do, they should be held accountable for the fact that they give sanctuary to IRA terrorists who murdered my cousin in December 1971, and also Lexi Cummins, also my cousin, and escaped across the border. There's something wrong with the government and the Republic of Ireland in particular if they can give sanctuary to IRA murderers and killers and they think they can get away with it.
I'm very grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker, to my colleague for that comment. I'd like to move on to public services. Over the last number of years, we've been campaigning about the fact that public services in Northern Ireland are constrained because the Barnett formula has not served us well, and we've been getting less than what the Northern Ireland Fiscal Commission and Council have accepted we need. That means year on year public services are being reduced in Northern Ireland. That means year on year we are not getting the sort of uplift required to make sure our constituents benefit from devolution. And new members to this House won't have probably experienced the protracted agony around devolution in Northern Ireland and the importance of getting it restored 5 months ago. But one part of that was ensuring that there was sufficient public finances available. And I think there is a key opportunity, though not mentioned in this King's speech, but hopefully something that the new incoming government will focus on, to draw upon the lessons of the Holtham Commission from Wales, to draw upon the positive uplift that is there, not to provide us with need, but what we need and what we need to reform, what we need to transform public services. Because at the moment, the challenges aren't about how we grow, how we develop the provisions for our people, irrespective of their community background in Northern Ireland. It's about what special schools we close. It's about what hospitals we close. It's about what services we stop providing. And I ask, as somebody who speaks for our corner of the United Kingdom in this place, that there would be earnest engagement on public services and public funding in Northern Ireland. Devolution was restored on the basis of an agreement that we reached with the then government, but it was supported by Labour in February of this year. Safeguarding the Union document allowed devolution to be restored and has contained within its key and significant commitments that we look forward to the Labour government honouring. Their members supported it at the time in February. They know the importance of it. And whilst I see reference in the King's speech to resetting relationships with the European Union, and as I said earlier, we should have good relationships and we should build upon those good relationships with near neighbours, we need to carefully nurture the arrangements that were agreed in February and need to be delivered. It's about removing barriers within our own country. We can focus on relationships with others outside, and we should. But that should not be to the detriment of that which makes this country work. There are opportunities about regional connectivity, opportunities to build on the Union Connectivity Review. The creation of a Council for the Regions and Borders looks quite like the East-West Council that was agreed back in February as part of the Safeguarding the Union document. We'll have to study the detail. If it's a rename and it's a rebadge, that's fine. But we need to talk about how do we move people and products from one part of our country to another. Where's the connectivity review work on the A75 when you move from Northern Ireland into Scotland and down toward Carlisle? How do we think about this as a national endeavour? There will be Scottish members of Parliament now newly elected on the Labour benches who will take a keen interest in making sure that the Union works across the United Kingdom, and we want to play our part in that. Mr Deputy Speaker, on defence, I've spent the last 8 years on the Defence Select Committee. I've spoken many times of the contribution from my constituency of Talis and the NLAWs and how important they were in the initial weeks of defence of Kyiv particularly and Ukraine more generally. But the eye has been taken off the ball on support for key industries within my constituency and important for Northern Ireland as a whole in the defence sphere. You will have seen negative briefing in the last 24 hours around Harnla Wolf. I want to see a very clear commitment from this government that they believe in the contracts that have been awarded to Belfast. They believe in the renaissance of shipbuilding in Belfast. They adhere to the commitments of the National Shipbuilding Review that talks about building skills and opportunities throughout our United Kingdom, and that irrespective of the ups and downs, highs and lows of any individual company, that the aspiration and the economic benefits of retaining shipbuilding and growing the shipbuilding capacity in Belfast is highly important. So too the issues around Boeing wishing to bring Spirit Aerospace back in to their company. Significant issues arise in that for the economy of Belfast and Northern Ireland, the largest private employer with high-skilled manufacturing jobs in my constituency, but servicing the entirety of the United Kingdom, something government needs to focus on, something previous business secretaries did, and current secretaries for business are. I'm not suggesting they aren't, but there's a huge opportunity in the next 6 months that we need to land to secure the importance for us. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I realise I'm going beyond what is the suggested time limit, there is a proposal here for a football regulator. Good. And we'll have the debate in the next number of weeks and months, probably by the Honourable Member for Strangford, as to whether that's a football regulator for England or in this national parliament, whether that's a football regulator for football within our country. But if I didn't close with this, I would probably have one less vote come the next election. My constituent, Davy Warren, who used to serve me on my way to school in the newsagents, texts me to say, Gavin, support England if you like on Sunday. They're not your team, but they're the only team from our country, so support England if you like. But remind them all that Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline is a Northern Ireland football team anthem. And the Green and White Army were very happy to lend that anthem to all of you. But we will reclaim it. And just to remind you gently that the last time Spain faced a home nation in any significant final or competition, and Jim Shannon was there and I wasn't born. Northern Ireland beat Spain. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
To make his maiden speech, I call Narendra Jas.
To represent the new constituency of Wolverhampton West. It was created by the incorporation of 7 wards from the previous Wolverhampton South West constituency, with 1 ward coming from the previous Wolverhampton North East constituency and 1 ward coming from Wolverhampton South East constituency. As with so many other places in our country, housing is a major issue in my constituency. I'm pleased to note the housing measures set out by His Majesty's government in the gracious speech. Our country faces a growing housing crisis. In the year to March 2024, the number of new homes started by builders in England was about 135,000, a 22% fall on the previous year. Housing completions in England were only about just over 153,000 units, representing a 12% annual fall. Moreover, planning applications have fallen. In late November 2018, Prime Minister David Lloyd George chose to start his general election campaign in what is now the Wolverhampton West constituency with the famous Homes Fit for Heroes speech. He demanded better homes, saying, "What is our task? To make Britain a fit country for heroes to live in." I echo that sentiment and have every confidence that the government of today will deliver a significant boost to housing bills, especially, I hope, council housing, just as it did in the 1920s and the 1960s. Less than 25 years ago, it was possible to allocate a one-bedroom Wolverhampton council flat in less than 48 hours. Now it seems that the waiting list in so many parts of our country nears 48 months. We desperately need a mass programme of building council housing, quite literally an investment for the future. I'm a proud son of Wolverhampton, a Wolfronian, so called because our city was founded over 1,000 years ago by Lady Wolfram, and it is perhaps the only city in our country founded by a woman. I have lived in the city that I love since arriving from East Africa at the age of 4. I went to school in the city, went to college there, went to university, did my law degree, did my professional exams there, and did my legal training in a solicitor's office in the city to begin with. I've spent my working life as a social justice lawyer in the great firm of Thompson Solicitors, focusing on work for trade union members and on clinical negligence cases. Wolverhampton has a long and proud tradition of manufacturing, formerly being home to the renowned companies such as Sunbeam Cars, which held the land speed record, and Dye Motors, and incidentally my father worked on a lathe machine at Dye Motors. The constituency also contains the headquarters of Marston's, a big pub chain whose brewery in this month is being sold to Carlsberg, and I wish to work with others to encourage them to continue our city's 149-year tradition as a major brewing location. Our city has a fine tradition of assisting the disadvantaged. For example, headquartered in the constituency is the Haven, which is the second oldest charity in the country, providing refuge accommodation for women and children escaping domestic abuse. We are also the head office of the excellent Refugee and Migrant Centre, a national centre of expertise. I'm a long-standing and active trade unionist and on the Executive Council of the GMB. And I'm always conscious that the first national union agreement with an employer for an 8-hour day was actually signed in Wolverhampton in the 1930s. Those who are unfortunate enough not to know Wolverhampton are often surprised as to how much our city has to offer. We have a Premier League football team, Wolverhampton Wanderers, the Wolves, and I'm a proud wearer of the Wolves badge as well. I'm fortunate enough to have a season ticket at the club with my son. And in this week of English football, and our England players did us proud, we have achieved so much as an England football team. Bearing that in mind, I recall that for many years, Tan Cullis, who lived in the city whilst he was the England manager. And I also recall the great Wolves player Billy Wright, who captained the England football team on the most occasions. And we have a statue of Billy Wright in the city centre stadium, the Molyneux. Correspondingly, perhaps the best-known captain of the England cricket team was Rachel, later Baroness Hayhoe-Flint, who in 1963 hit the first six in a women's test match against the old enemy Australia, and who was unbeaten in 6 test series. Also capped for England in hockey, she grew up in the city and lived there all of her life. The constituency is also home to the country's first all-weather floodlit racecourse. Despite the budget cuts of recent years, there are 3 hospitals in Wolverhampton West and many fine schools, and I'm pleased to say 4 special schools. We are blessed with cultural facilities, such as the fantastic Victoria-era West Park, the 19th century Grand Theatre, the finest arts and crafts National Trust House in the country, Whitwick Manor, and the Wolverhampton Art Gallery, home to nationally important collections of pop art and of Northern Ireland Troubles art. I will now note the contributions and influence of my predecessors, regrettably the most well-known of whom may be Enoch Powell. But having lived in Wolverhampton since the age of 4, I can attest that community relations have improved very markedly. And this has not happened by chance. It has come by because of hard work by very many people, including several of my predecessors, and by groups such as Wolverhampton Interfaith, of which I have been a member for several years. I want to pay tribute to the work done by my predecessors, Stuart Anderson, who was the MP before the last election, and then he decided to stand in South Shropshire. Jenny Jones, who fostered the developing democracy of Eastern Europe around the turn of the century, and most of all, the work carried out by the backbencher of the year 2008, my great friend and predecessor Rob Maris, particularly with his assisted dying bill and his pioneering work on adaptation to climate change. I have to say that Wolverhampton is underrated. It is a great place to live and a great city. I am sure that the measures set out in the gracious speech will help it to become greater still.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Darpar Sir Trope.
television, Are you expressing solidarity with a different part of the culture?
He doesn't bring me one. He's from Bangladesh. Yesterday, a T-boy in Bangladesh, he ran away with 400 million Bangladeshi rupees. Can you believe that?
Wow.
T-boy is Prime Minister's personal secretary.
Personal secretary.
Assistant. Not personal.
Is this a common occurrence?
Yes, Mr. Sen, that's why we even have a guarantee that a CSS driver someday will have
For some thieves.
So keep an eye on me.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
I don't like to sit away from you. Why don't you sit with me? It's very hard.
there's something on your face. But give you a break from shaving. Yeah, I was told that. I never thought that. She didn't never, or they didn't ask me. They, yeah.
Oh yes, we just got meeting about this.
Oh yeah, please concentrate. Things that it's nice for everybody.
Afternoon, everyone. We'll be missing a fixture today, but we'll begin anyway. Start with some opening remarks. The United States has consistently made it clear that actions that undermine stability in the West Bank, including attacks by Israeli settlers against Palestinians and Palestinian attacks against Israelis, are unacceptable. In December, Secretary Blinken announced a visa restriction policy pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act, targeting individuals believed to have been involved in or meaningfully contributing to undermining peace, security, or stability in the West Bank. On February 1st, President Biden signed an executive order giving us the authority to impose sanctions on persons engaged in such activities. The United States has since imposed sanctions on 11 individuals and 11 entities and pursued dozens of visa restrictions under these two authorities. Today, under this policy, and as part of our ongoing effort to promote peace, security, and stability in the region, we are taking steps to impose visa restrictions on an additional group of individuals who have used violence against persons or property or unduly restricted civilians' access to essential services and basic necessities. Additionally, today Secretary Blinken announced the designation of Elor Azaria, a former Israeli Defense Forces sergeant, for his involvement in a gross violation of human rights in the West Bank. As such, Azaria and any immediate family members are generally ineligible for entry into the United States. As we have said on a number of occasions, promoting accountability and justice for any crimes, violations, and abuses committed against Palestinians and against Israelis are essential to stable, just, and enduring peace in the region. We once again call on the government of Israel and the Palestinian Authority to hold accountable those responsible for violence in the West Bank, and we reiterate that we will continue to impose our own accountability measures as necessary. And with that, Simon?
Yeah, follow up on that. So these sanctions against, it's a visa ban against Elor Azaria. Does that imply that he hadn't had that the treatment of his case by the Israeli authorities was not fully in line with the standards of justice that the US would like to see?
So we have made clear, let me speak to it generally first and I'll speak with